Good morning and welcome to this special edition of the Chairman's Fireside Chat. With us today, we have Mr. Carlton Saffa, who is the Chief Market Officer for Saracen Casino Resort. Good morning, Carlton. How are you, sir?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. Thanks for being here with us. And we're actually shooting, it's kind of a special place this morning. We're off location rather than our normal studios there at the downstream. And we're here in beautiful Little Rock, Arkansas, here at the 1836 Club. And we appreciate you setting this up and making time out of your schedule to come and talk to us today.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you and to the nation.
Yeah, so a lot of exciting things have occurred since our grand opening in October of last year. But first, let's kind of get in and do a brief profile on the man, the myth, the legend that is Carlton Saffa by telling us what is a Chief Market Officer exactly?
That's a good question. So when I was given this title, Chief Market Officer, I wasn't exactly sure. And I've got to credit the business committee for coming up with this title. Originally, I was project manager, which was really a title through construction and development of the property. And when I was given this title, Chief Market Officer, I did a little research, and I learned that it's actually a very progressive, forward-looking title that's being used in some of the largest corporations in America. Fortune 500, even really the Fortune 10 are using it. So I'm kind of proud that we have it for Saracen Development, the holding company for the casino. Essentially what a Chief Market Officer does is look over the market. So my role at Saracen is not so much the nuts and bolts of the day-to-day work within the casino, although I am embedded in certain components of that. But it's really the property's presence within the Arkansas market. And I love that. Because to me, Saracen meant the return of the Quapaw people to a state that they lived in, or you all lived in, forever, right? I'm very fond of saying that Quapaw never left, but when they returned, it was in a huge way, with the biggest investment in tourism in the state's history. I tell people all the time, Quapaw is everywhere in Arkansas. You just have to look around. The governor's mansion sits in the Quapaw Quarter. The Boy Scout Council is the Quapaw Area Council, and on and on. And I love having this conversation around Arkansas, especially Quapaw being an Arkansas word. But my job is to develop Saracen and at the same time do what I can to remind folks that the Quapaw were and are Arkansas. So Chief Market Officer takes many forms. I oversee the legal functions, the political functions, the compliance functions. The marketing department, the traditional casino marketing functions are within what I do. But really, I'm most proud of the fact that this state was dominated by two racetracks turned casinos, racinos, and it was a duopoly. There were two licenses. That was it. We've been operational in a big way with the main Saracen property for less than a year, and it's like we've always been here with Saracen.
So let's talk about that for a second. You mentioned that it was a hard push in 2018 to come up with the other two licenses in the Constitution, the state Constitution. Leading up to that, though, what were you doing previous to coming to Saracen, and when did you actually start with Saracen?
So I feel like I've lived three distinctly different lives. I went to college, graduated from the University of Arkansas. I was born in Oklahoma. I came to Arkansas for college. I grew up in western Oklahoma in Lawton, and if you're familiar with Lawton, the trees grow sideways where there are trees, not much. So I visited Fayetteville as a high school senior and fell in love with it. It was beautiful, fell in love with Arkansas, and decided this is where I wanted to be. Met my wife in college, fell in love, and the rest is history. My dad had some success in the insurance business, and I could either go to law school or I could go to work and get married. So it made sense to go to work and get married. And it's worked out. She's changed my life. We've been married, 13 years now. I'm 39, and I started dating her a few days after my 21st birthday. So insurance business was great. It allowed me to provide for a family. And then a man I knew as a friend, Governor Asa Hutchinson, was elected. And he said, "Would you like to come work with us?" And I said, yes. And I had known him a long time. I had helped him through his campaign. And I spent 5 years working with the governor in the Capitol. And that was fun. We worked on essentially anything that was on fire. So if it was in the newspaper, I generally was working on it. His legislative priorities, some of the touchier agencies, one of which was the Racing Commission, which is the gaming regulator. And through that, I had a role in the development of the rules that regulate this process. But I'm often pegged as an action junkie. I like action, and the Capitol had a lot of action. But I had an opportunity to come work with the Quapaw Nation, and that was in June of 2019. So I began work when Saracen was an idea. It was an application pending for a gaming license. At that point, we had a very small office in Pine Bluff downtown. In fact, it was a bill collector's office. Cheap rent, kind of a dumpy place. And it was really funny because people still thought it was the bill collector's office. We'd get people come in trying to pay their bills. No, this is the casino. But that was fun. And I will tell you, the day we got our gaming license was one of the coolest days of my life because it was real. It wasn't real for about 2 weeks, you know. I remember telling my wife the day that we were going to the commission for our license hearing. She said, "Do you feel good?" I said, "I feel really good, baby." She said, "What do you think of the odds you get your gaming license today?" And I said, like 95%. Now, my wife is not political. So to her, she's like, "Oh, no." And I said, "You don't understand. In politics, 90 to 95 is a lock, right?"
Right.
And it turned out to be a lock. You know, the Quapaw application, the strength of the proposal, the history of the nation in the area, the leadership in Jefferson County speaking for the proposition, it made it work. And I think you can contrast that to the struggles of Russellville. And I am so proud of that chairman. Everyone expected there to be trouble in Pine Bluff and things to go smoothly in Russellville. And in Pine Bluff, things have worked well. And in Russellville, the running joke in Little Rock circles is the only folks that are making money are lobbyists and lawyers, because there hasn't been a slot machine spun, there hasn't been a card dealt, and there is no end in sight. In fact, last count, there's 5 cases still pending, one at the Arkansas Supreme Court. So that the tribe has a commercial asset in Pine Bluff, one of, by my count, maybe 4 or 5 tribes in the entire country that operate in a commercial space, is a source of pride for me, that this is something that big Oklahoma tribes, the Chickasaws, the Cherokees, the Choctaws, are not doing. And the Cherokees and Choctaws, of course, have sought access to the Arkansas market, but the Quapaw people have successfully pulled it off with a commercial license in Pine Bluff.
And they also like to, I guess it's an important, significant point that they also have ancestral ties back to the state of Arkansas, having both been, on the Trail of Tears at that time. Quapaw people, of course, our history runs deep with the state, having been named after our people, basically, essentially. And you mentioned, the hard work and the lift to go from an idea, just a conceptual idea, to the actual award of the license, having, one of 4, well, technically one of 3 in the state that is operating now. What was it like to go from opening the annex to shifting or pivoting to this $285 million casino project?
Well, it was a lot. We constructed that building during COVID, and the supply chain disruptions of COVID were very real. And things operated a little differently at that time. Of course, that was before I met you. It was before I met, Secretary Treasurer Barker. It was a slog every day to get it done. And I do not pretend to be a construction expert. I know what I don't know. But what I saw every day was development, hard work and development. There were no less than 800 tradesmen and women involved in the construction of that building. And COVID hit right in the middle of it. So we began to set up stations where we were temperature testing. We actually were using LiDAR, like the military uses, where you could walk by and get your temperature tested. Because 800 check-ins every morning was incredible. But building that place was an event in itself. The Quapaw Nation built the single largest investment in tourism in Arkansas history with the construction of Saracen. It was the single largest construction project in Arkansas in 2020. And when we moved across the street from the annex, directly across the highway to the main property, it was a change for me. I'm a people person, and so I was the first employee of Saracen. We we're just a little office with hope for a license. And I knew everyone. And I generally knew their spouses or their children. And, I knew what was going on. And that's me. I walk the floor and I know our folks. As we grew, it became more and more difficult to know everyone's favorite, NFL team and what they do on the weekends. And I miss that in some ways. I mean, I don't miss the smaller revenue. The revenue of Saracen and what that means for you all is wonderful. But it was kind of like a family business when we had the annex. Now we have really the crown jewel of Southeast Arkansas. I know downstream is the crown jewel of northeastern Oklahoma. But what we have built is an incredible destination in Southeast Arkansas. So it was a big move. I will tell you, the annex was a brilliant play because I'm a golfer, and so I can't help but describe the annex as the driving range. So you go to the driving range to learn how to play golf, and then you go on the golf course and you get better at it. The challenge in Arkansas, in a state where we didn't have casino gaming, was staffing. I imagine this is what Oklahoma was like right after the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act passed. You probably had people from Vegas and Atlantic City come in and assist. Yeah. But now you've got homegrown talent, right? In Arkansas, very limited homegrown talent. And what does exist really works at the other properties. So we did import some staff from places like Mississippi. We've had some folks from downstream assist. My friend Shane Ellick is still there every day helping us on property. But we had to develop the talent. And so in the annex, for example, you could take someone who might have been a bank teller and put them in the cashier in the cage. And now they're working, but they're no further than, hey, I need help from their supervisor. Slot techs. Some of our all-star slot techs were definitely not slot techs a few years ago. One of my favorite slot techs actually was a residential advisor in a college dormitory. And now he's a slot tech, right? But he learned at the annex, where he was no further than, I need help from a supervisor who knew what he was doing. It was the driving range where you could learn to hit balls. Then you go to the main Saracen floor, which is 80,000 square feet, about a football field and a half, and they know how to work. So the folks that started as frontline personnel at the annex are now your leads and supervisors and your middle managers doing the same thing with personnel on the big site. And I'm proud, there is no model for a Saracen employee, right? Hard work is the most important thing, but people come from all walks of life to work with us, and the annex allowed us to at least get a good core group of folks to be our supervisors and our managers, and empower folks to be able to work in a big building. Saracen is every bit as big as downstream in terms of the gaming floor, and that's intimidating if you walk into that cold, never had gaming experience. I don't think it would have worked without the annex.
I think you hit on a very valuable point there as well. You mentioned revenue in there, and we'll get to that later, but the employee base, the workforce within the Saracen team, it's really been amazing to witness. To go from the annex, like you said, the training ground, this laboratory of folks that have never worked in gaming, perhaps, to be able to come on board, learn our processes, learn policies, learn how to pay out a simple jackpot, etc. Those are key duties that, like you said, a lot of folks may not have been introduced to or had past experience, and so for them to be able to have that training and to get what they need and that knowledge, and then take it out onto the floor in the big Saracen property, I like that. I like what I see, and to be able to witness that, it's really brought the property to life, and you articulated it really well there.
Well, I'm just proud of the investment that the tribe has made. I said it a second ago, but in some ways it's a return to Arkansas, although that's not really true because, again, the Quapaw people never left. But Arkansas is a Quapaw order and it's a Quapaw state, but in a very visible way. The return was huge. And I think it's a way, and I don't mean to speak for what I believe are the core tenets of Quapaw culture, but I believe it's a way that's consistent with your beliefs.
Yeah.
It's about empowering people, giving folks a chance to better themselves, better the community. I think folks that have not been to Saracen would be proud of what they're seeing. Ultimately, as the sole shareholder of the tribe, as the beneficiary, but you've changed lives in Pine Bluff. We have employees who've never owned homes who've now been able to make a down payment. You have folks that really didn't have soft skills that now have soft skills, whether it's waiting tables or being a slot tech. They're all hospitality jobs. My job's a hospitality job. Every job in the casino is a hospitality job.
Sure.
And as the world changes to being more technology-driven, remote work and the like, the people who have soft skills will be fewer and fewer, but those jobs will never go away.
Yeah.
So you haven't just created an incredible business in Pine Bluff, you've created an opportunity for folks to grow themselves. And we haven't had too many folks leave, but when they do leave and say, hey, I'm going to go start my own restaurant or I'm going to go start my own, I'm proud of it, because I think the investment of the Quapaw people was the kickoff point to change someone's life.
Yeah. So let's go back to, I guess, last summer. And I really want to brag on you for a second, because our initial phone call, I think, was like a week into me being in office. And I think it was like mid-August, somewhere around there. And really, for those that are unfamiliar with our political process, we file typically in early May. I think I filed the day after Mother's Day weekend. And so from May, we're campaigning. In June, we're campaigning. In July, at the end of July, that's when the elections come back. And then there's this span of time where we still have to wait to be installed as officers to the business committee. And I would say, knowing what I know now, to know that we were still involved pretty heavily in this construction project. I mean, there was still a lot of moving pieces. There was still a lot of issues that continually came up on a daily basis. You were very instrumental. You were very crucial to bringing Saracen online. And if anybody were to ask me, I say that Carlton Saffa really kept the cart on the rails during this transition period. And so not only were you resolving issues and dealing with issues on the casino construction side of things, but to be able to kind of carry the torch through a transitional phase with our leadership, that speaks volumes to your leadership capabilities.
Well, thank you. It was, I have a wife and 2 young children, and I was a little bit nervous about me. I knew I would have been okay. Somehow it would have worked out. What I was mostly concerned about was the project. My daughter Stella's 10, my son Charlie's 6, and I laugh and say that my third child, Saracen's almost 2, because I spend more time with Saracen than I do with my children. Anybody that works full-time spends more time at work than they do with their children, sadly, right? And I'm all in. Every bit of favor or help or anything is on the table to make this project succeed. And so failure was not an option. And so as long as I could be involved in Saracen, I was going to work sun up, sundown to make it happen. And it's working.
So let's talk about that, because I think there's a lot of feelings and emotion that go with some of the things that we just discussed. The idea, concept, and then bringing it online, bringing Saracen online, the ability to provide jobs to all of our workforce and really make an impact in the community. We had a lot riding on that grand opening date. Can you kind of capture some of the thoughts or ideas the week leading up to that? I know that there was a lot of moving pieces. Again, like I said, there were a couple times where there was, I wouldn't say cause for concern, but it's just questioning, like, is this really going to happen? Is this really going to take place? Are we going to get it done in time? Can you talk to us about that?
So opening day was in October. We had hoped originally for a little bit earlier, but of course COVID and the disruptions. As you remember, we led up to it with a series of soft openings. The first night was our big soft opening, and I was so proud that we had the governor there, we had the attorney general there, we had half a dozen state legislators there. And, I think it meant a lot. You don't get the crew out, all of them, like that often, and I think that meant a lot, really, about what your investment meant in the community. But we had a lot riding on it. Casinos open sometimes and the slot systems fail, or the lights go out, or the fire alarms go off,
or you get an Ocean's 12 or Ocean's 13 scenario.
Yeah, and although, side note, I always tell people, when we do this job right, it's supposed to be a lot of fun. People make movies about this, right? We could be working in a dog food factory, and there's something against dog food, but this is a fun place when things work right. And no Ocean's 11 moment, although it's a great movie, it's a lot of fun, but it worked. I will tell you, the biggest day that we had was in October, that first opening day. And our first patron had driven from Fort Worth to see the property because he had heard about it. That day held as our best day through October, through November, through December, through January, through February, through March. And then we began to see clouds part a little bit of sunshine. I don't want to say relief from COVID because obviously we're still living with it with the Delta variant even now. But we began to see a little more comfort with the patrons. And we began to see our head counts go up, our volume in terms of handle go up. And we saw what Saracen really could do starting in March. So again, October was great. That first week was incredible with the build-up. We had what I think was an incredible night. We had the tradesmen and their spouses come in. So many people build something, and their wife or their children or their mother or their significant other never see what they've been working on for the last year. And that night meant a lot to me, to have folks that had run, there are 19 miles of electrical cable and Ethernet underneath Saracen. Somebody laid all that cable, which meant somebody missed some t-ball games or a birthday party or something. It's their job, but that's what they were doing. To be able to show their wife, maybe this is what I was doing, meant a lot. So that tradesman night was a lot of fun. I digress to say we got through that opening week, I think, without a hitch. Our numbers were okay. But then when we saw the clouds part with COVID, we saw what Saracen could really do starting in March, and we had to look back.
So let's talk about that for a second. You mentioned your job responsibility entails having a firm grasp or knowledge of the market. Where are we in terms of our position in the market, and how are we impacting and affecting the local and state economies?
So a couple of things. The state's economist is a friend of mine, and he told me even in the days of the annex that they could see changes in tax collected, sales tax, income taxes, payroll taxes, just in the annex. And then you move to Big Saracen with, which is what I call it, the main property across the street, Big Saracen, with about 900 employees. And you could begin to see it immediately in the impact. The unemployment rates went down, the gaming revenue, the tax, what you would call a rev share in Indian country, it's a tax here in a commercial environment, immediately provided an influx of funds into the community, which allowed them to do things that, frankly, they need to do. You see roofs on courthouses being repaired. You see first responders being equipped as they should. And you see a gratefulness within Pine Bluff. Thank you for investing. Thank you for the jobs. I get asked sometimes, what about the naysayers? Because gaming is new to Arkansas. It's not like Oklahoma. What about the folks that say gaming brings bad things? It brings crime. It brings alcohol. The truth is that alcohol, gambling, crime have existed since the dawn of time in some ways, right? And in Arkansas, they've existed since before we were a state. It's just now that they're legal. And in being legal, you get some good. There's bad in everything. Salt is bad, right? There's bad in everything. But when you legalize something, you create 900 jobs. Saracen went from being a place people went to go spend money on a slot machine to a place that a friend or a family member worked, to the place that's providing revenue that's making their community a better place. And for the state, gaming is such an important component that they look at gaming receipts when they forecast the budget going forward. So it's been a huge difference maker, and we're just getting started.
And I think when you talk about those types of issues, crime, gaming, drinking, all of that, I feel like there's, like you said, there's good and bad to everything. And I would say in this scenario, the good leaps and bounds outweighs the bad. And I think that, it's just an incredible success story, not only what we've been able to do for the tribe and for the business, but also the local community. You mentioned it earlier. We're changing lives. People who historically didn't have a consistent pay or a consistent job or even a banking account, checking account, savings account, those types of things. People have retirement. People are putting into a 401k. That's an incredible story.
I was so proud. The first business unit we opened was actually the Q store before the annex was constructed. So the annex was built in 100 days. So the Q store was a quick sort of facelift to bring it up to standard, and it opened. Mm-hmm. And we did our first orientation with those employees and had an almost 80% 401k participation rate with folks working in the Q store. I was blown away. That was one of my most proud moments. As silly and trivial as that is, and one of a million cool moments at Saracen. But we had people who had never had an employer say, I'm willing to invest in a 401k match. Yeah. And it was cool, to explain what a 401k is. And someone goes, whoa, I've never thought about retirement. It was a cool human issue.
Yeah.
The second thing I think is interesting is there's not a week that goes by that I don't see someone on the floor or around town that says, do you talk to the chairman often? Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Just tell him thank you. People say thank you for investing in the community. And I don't think we can ever take that for granted, because what Quapaw means in Pine Bluff is giving the community a chance. Now, obviously, this makes sense financially for the Quapaw Nation to do this. But the people of Pine Bluff say, thank you for investing in us. Thank you for giving us a chance. But you asked me about the market, and I want to brag for a second.
Sure.
So, if you know gaming, you know that the most valuable thing in gaming is your player database, yes. Your book. So we haven't been around that long. We sign up a lot of folks every month to join the Q Club, and folks are familiar with the Q Club from Quapaw Casino and downstream. We run the Q Club at Saracen as well. And we're rolling great guns on sign-ups. It's great. We find that over half of our sign-ups are from Little Rock zip codes, so it's working. Our goal is to employ as much as we can in Jefferson County, but entertain all of Arkansas. To date, that is working. But we look at what we call the Little Rock micro market. Mm-hmm. About 1 million people within this micro market. And this micro market is split between Saracen and our friends in Hot Springs at the Oaklawn property.
Sure.
Oaklawn has existed for over 100 years. So you can imagine the player database that they have that is multi-generational. Of course, horses, but they ran electronic games of skill, and then a modified racino situation up until they became a casino. So their player book is huge. And kudos to them. That's what you get when you've been in business a long time. It's a good player book.
Sure.
Our player book is growing fast, and I'm proud of where we are in with our rated play, the growth in rated play. But I don't want to bury the lead. For 5 months in a row now, we have exceeded Oaklawn's revenues. And I am so proud to be the new kid on the block, essentially a startup, new operation, but to have a brand identity that is such that we are able to outpace our peers. The guys that run Oaklawn are fantastic. I consider them friends. It's kind of like playing basketball with Michael Jordan and being able to dunk on him, right? So it's not a beat your chest moment, but it's validating to see those numbers work. It's what I believed was there. It's what others believed was there. I'm also particularly proud of what we're doing with table games, and I don't mean to be so specific and granular, but on a slot machine, you plug it in, and as long as it doesn't break, it works. Mm-hmm. Slot machines are our core business, but the table games are so training-driven, person-driven, human-driven, and to be brand new and have an incredible team of dealers and develop the reputation we have, which is if you want to play cards or you want to throw dice, you go to Saracen. To be this new and have that reputation is something I'm so proud of. And that speaks to Matt Harkness, our general manager, always encouraging us to think bigger. Our table games director, Neil Atkinson. But we are known as the place you go play tables.
Yeah.
And I'm just, even though it is a smaller percentage of the revenue, I'm almost more proud of the table games because it's harder to pull off. Because you got to have a body there that counts and does it and knows the people, knows the players. It's just more involved than slot machines, even though that's, of course, the bulk of the revenue. But the table games numbers we see monthly always make me smile.
I appreciate you touching on that because I was having a conversation with a colleague last week about this very thing, and you mentioned that in a normal table games environment, you have somebody that is dealing the cards, counting the cards, and hopefully somewhat personable. That's really the baseline, the standard. What sets us apart and where we excel is you have those different personalities, and really it's a performance.
It is,
and we do it well.
we do.
And the word is out that we do it well.
So in Arkansas, and thank you, we do, you're right. In Arkansas, our property is the only property that really looks like Las Vegas. You know, Oaklawn's a beautiful place. They've got the thoroughbred track. Southland is a dog track, and they have a large casino. But you can tell that it has been a work in progress with additions and changes. But when you walk into Saracen, you feel like you're on the Las Vegas Strip. High ceilings, lots of machines. The pit absolutely looks like something like Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And so we've provided for the first time a Vegas-style experience. And so our players like coming because they feel like they don't have to hop on that Southwest flight, fly to Las Vegas to play. Because really, you plop down at a table at Saracen, you might as well be on the Strip. It is not something Arkansas has ever had before. Interestingly, the last time a gaming hall of any kind was opened in Arkansas before Saracen was in the 50s. And that's when Southland opened as a dog track.
A legal one.
Legal. That's true. We'll make that distinction. And then, of course, Oaklawn was over 100 years ago. So that day in October, when you cut the ribbon and opened Saracen, we made history that hadn't happened in generations, right? From the 50s here to 2020, that hadn't happened. And this is the first time in Arkansas history a legal casino, purpose-built, has opened. So the very existence of the property is historical.
Absolutely.
But to do it in such a personable way, that's the thing, right? Folks want to come for a million reasons. Everyone wants to win, but they mostly want to have a good experience. And just that dealer can be a total game changer. You know, we have folks. There's a craps dealer. Her name is Teriyaki. Believe it or not, and people want to go to Teriyaki's table. They ask if Teriyaki's working just because she's a hoot. And if you're having a bad day, I don't know how Teriyaki couldn't change that for you. But it's someone like Teriyaki who can change your day and make you come back to Saracen. That's the differentiator.
Yeah, it's that good experience.
Absolutely.
And okay, so you mentioned, you know, we've talked about several different components to Saracen. We've talked about kind of the construction leading up to grand opening. We've talked about the impact that it's had on local and state economy, but then also the ability to affect and change lives there in the Pine Bluff and Jefferson County area. You've talked about a little bit, you know, on the gaming floor, talked about our table games department, some of our e-games as well. I would be remiss, and you really can't mention Saracen without talking about our cuisine, our food. So let's talk about the food situation. What's up?
So Arkansans love to eat. I mean, everybody loves to eat, but Arkansans love to eat. And especially in rural Arkansas, folks will drive. You know, my wife and I used to love to go to a little town called Dumas, which when you get to Saracen from Little Rock, you're like, Saracen's like halfway to Dumas. We would drive to Dumas to eat a steak. It was a great date because we could drive all that way, talk, drive all the way back. It's almost like we made an overnight trip. And I'll tell you a quick funny story. We used to have a date night, and we'd go down the street and eat. We'd be back in an hour. And my mother-in-law would watch the children, and she'd say, "An hour? That's what you got?" So we started going to Taylor's. I say that to say this. That's in our culture, is that we love to eat, and people will travel to eat from Little Rock or wherever. You can walk into Saracen on any given night, and the room is full of people who have driven from Little Rock for dinner. Whether they're gaming or not, probably a difference table to table, but they're driving to eat in Pine Bluff for dinner. If you had told me 5 years ago that you could walk into the dining room at Red Oak at Saracen in Pine Bluff, well, I wouldn't have known what Saracen was 5 years ago. You could walk into a dining room in Pine Bluff and you would see a who's who of Little Rock on any given Friday or Saturday night. I wouldn't have believed you. Today, it's absolutely true. Just the other night, I was in there. I look around. There's a former Attorney General. The Secretary of Education is there. game and fish commissioners there, and they're just having supper.
And these aren't one and done patrons. These are folks that keep continually coming back.
That's right. I tell people in Little Rock, if you don't want to see folks you know, don't come to Saracen, because you're going to see folks you know from Little Rock, from the better neighborhoods, the upper echelon groups, all the way to the suburbs. They're there. We lead with food in many ways. Gaming is, of course, our core business, but beyond the service that we can provide, that smiling face, the teriyaki of the craps table, right? Beyond that, we provide a superior product in food. And I think that speaks to the commitment of quality of the tribe. I think that is a carryover from downstream and the traditions of downstream, that this is not just a casino. I mean, that was the beauty of the downstream property, was that it was not just a building on the side of the road with some slot machines in it, that it was actually a destination.
Sure.
We did the same thing, and I think if you poll folks, they'll tell you the best restaurant in the state is Red Oak. Now, it's my job to say that, but people who are not paid to say that also believe that, and I think that the numbers play out. There are 38 restaurants in the United States that are certified to sell Kobe beef. LA, New York, Chicago, Hawaii, Pine Bluff, Arkansas. We sought and received a designation from the Japanese Beef Council, and we sell Kobe beef. It's incredible. You can come into our restaurant on a Thursday night without a reservation. Friday and Saturday, you're probably in a tough spot without a reservation. And they are people from all over Arkansas driving in droves. And I love it. If folks come because they want to see our poker room, by the way, the only live poker room in the state of Arkansas, as you know, is at Saracen. If they want to see our brewery at Legends, if they want to play a slot machine, if they want to play table games, if they want to come eat a bison tenderloin at Red Oak, they're all wins for the property and for the tribe. But 21 blackjack is the same game everywhere. Buffalo Gold is the same game everywhere. But the restaurant is not. And so you lead with food, and it makes a statement about your commitment to quality and who you are. We also have a buffet that I would describe as Las Vegas style, with lobster and crab and the like. It's something the market has never seen, and it has been a tremendous draw. We can see it in the numbers. The buffet is open in the evenings only right now. We can see it in the numbers on the day the buffet is open. People will drive an hour to eat that buffet, and of course they play some games on their way in and out. But food is what we're known for every bit as much as everything else. People ask me about our food, about sports betting, and about our poker room. They don't ask about the slot machines. They don't ask about the table games. They play them, and they love them. But those are just the little extras, the differentiators that make a difference.
And I think what's been interesting for at least what we've witnessed with the Saracen Casino property is it's distinct from the cuisine that's offered at downstream. So our patrons that frequent both places, they're going to see the difference between the two. And I'm not saying that one is any better than the other. It's just it's a different fare. It's more seafood. There's a lot more incorporated to the menu when it comes to seafood here in Arkansas. For those, and I just want to be clear, for those folks that want to go to Red Oak, you mentioned that it probably behooved them to have a reservation on a Friday or Saturday. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
But we can always make it work, especially for Quapaw's have first priority, of course. But let me know. I don't know how you'll produce this video, but I feel fine if you put my email address out there. If you want to come eat at Red Oak, we will find a spot for you. Absolutely.
Okay.
But yeah, you're right. So seafood is a big deal, right? There was an old adage, never order seafood in a steakhouse.
Absolutely.
We have totally proven that wrong. The scallops, we use dry pack scallops. Most folks have wet pack scallops. The salmon that we serve is incredible. It's all good. And there's a little bit of a southern twist to it also. One of our most popular dishes is actually a fried oyster that is in a bed of Esau corn. And Esau corn is a particular type of corn that's grown about 20 minutes from Pine Bluff. And super sweet. You can actually eat it raw. You don't even have to cook it.
Yeah.
So you take an oyster, you fry it, you serve it with grits and Esau corn. Just absolutely incredible. You'll see some similarities between the two restaurants.
Sure.
At the core, the carnal, the meat is still at the middle.
Right.
But they
still have the bison?
Absolutely.
Bison
tenderloin is my favorite. That's what I eat, is the bison tenderloin.
Yeah.
But you'll see some similarities. And of course, Chef Randall is now at Downstream.
Yeah, he came back to Downstream and he really put on a spread. He's He's an incredible chef. He does amazing things.
His knife, that story about that knife, we told that story all over Arkansas, and I loved it. I think it was his great-grandfather's knife. And he cut all the steaks at Saracen with that knife. We'd have the press in to cover the building, and I'd always go get around and say, tell him about your knife, because I love that story, I think it's so cool that you can spend hundreds of millions of dollars to build a destination property, and at the end of the day, you have a tribal member who has moved to Pine Bluff with his grandfather's knife cutting these steaks. It's this wonderful tie of the old to the new. And those stories permeate the property. There's a gentleman named Wink Conyers who owned part of the land that the casino now sits on.
Right.
His nephew, Chef Derek Smith, was recruited from Memphis. He was running a renowned steakhouse in Memphis. Mm-hmm. And he literally cooks on land that his family once cultivated.
Yeah.
So, we always say farm to table, pasture to plate, bean to cup. But I just love the idea that Derek is cooking world-class food on land that 2-3 years ago his family was farming. It's kind of a cool circle.
It is. It's an incredible story, success story. And it's not just one story. There's like all of these different webs that play a part in the bigger story.